certainly, Jim, the prospect of a deal between the U.S. and China getting near is seen as a positive, although you and I think have both argued the downside would be far greater were there not to be a deal than the upside at this point. Though there may be those disappointed, at least in these reports that we're getting, both CNBC and the Journal and the Times, talking more about dollars and cents as opposed to real changes, structural changes that will be in the agreement, or lack thereof, I should say, in any final agreement in terms of how the Chinese allow U.S. companies to operate there, and, of course, the key that you talk about all the time, intellectual property, sharing of it, stealing of it, and the like.
Look, you need to see something concrete more than just this time it's an $18 billion Cheniere Energy LNG deal. Before it was soy. We don't want those kinds
that was
of deals.
interesting.
Wasn't that
18 billion.
Cheniere, you can't even.
They're going to have to build a bunch of new trains,
exactly.
right?
You have to start using Tellurian, which is Sharif Suki created another company besides just Cheniere. Cheniere is sold out. I don't know what that is. Poland wants Cheniere. Everybody, we're going to use Cheniere to be able to defeat.
You've also got the huge private company Freeport, which I know as well.
That's going to be important.
Michael Smith.
They're using. We're sending out 5% of our natural gas.
Yep.
But there's no shortage here, if only just because we have much more than we need. But we don't have enough pipe. What I thought was interesting, David, was that they talk about the idea that the bogus joint ventures are going to go away. So what we're looking for, to me, is either American Express or, say, MasterCard, or maybe Visa, just being able to go. There's $6.8 billion $6.8 billion credit cards in China, and we would love to crack into that market. So I would like to see that. Apple's trading up. It was up about 50 cents last night. Now it's moving up a dollar. People feel that Apple's going to be a beneficiary of the year of good feeling. Micron. David, I think that there's half the people seem to want to sell the news before the news happens because they want to get ahead of the people who are going to sell the news. And another half are saying, wait a second, this could be substantive for some of our tech companies.
It could be, but on that part, it's very difficult to know until we really see a final agreement. And then, as important, I think, and Lighthizer made this point last week in his testimony in the hearing, is how you hold them to whatever it is you agree to.
Right. I mean, there's this talk of being able to instantly put
reinstate
the tariffs back on. I
tariffs.
thought that was interesting. Yeah, David, look, there is the tariffs have fundamentally altered the reliability of dealing with China. And I think China's, some of their numbers are indicating that things are obviously, again, not that strong. There was an upgrade today of Hasbro. And I've been thinking ever since I talked to Brian Goldner, who is the excellent CEO of Hasbro, he's trying so hard to have less China.
Right.
Make fewer, toys are made in China. That's one of the things that China excels at. And you can't get off it fast enough. But that's what I think the Chinese are worried about, is the run on the factory, so to speak. How much American business is being taken away. And that's what that's the biggest Chinese fear.
Do you think there's the possibility that those who are more hawkish on this, and there are plenty of them,
right.
And I wouldn't even say they're necessarily, some people say on the conservative side, but not really. It's sort of actually, interestingly, both sides. Do you think that that pressure might get to Trump, who is known to sort of change his mind, as we know, and that things could get derailed if people don't feel that what we're being told is going to be that final agreement is not going to include enough of what you're talking about, concessions on the structural issues in the Chinese economy?
I think that's a little too sophisticated for the average hedge fund, honestly, at this point. I do think the average hedge fund is saying, wait a second, this guy's so mercurial. We thought there was going to be a North Korean deal, and he walked that back. I mean, is this just a total straw man, this deal? And he walks away from it because he's not happy with intellectual property. So let's not take the futures up too much, because if there's let's say we get an interview, off-the-record interview done by the hard camp that's even harder than Lighthouse, then what happens? I think people say, well, I just bought, I paid up for NVIDIA.
Not to put you on the spot, but I will, of course, I always do. I mean, what kind of downside percentage-wise, if in fact this were to fall apart? As little, given what is a fairly low percentage chance, but what would the downside be, the S&P?
I think it would be substantial. Half of this rally, I think you can put on the backs of the fact that Jay Powell switched his position. And I'd say probably half of it is, when it comes to the industrials, 40% of business that's done overseas, half of it's off of belief that China's going to be better. And the leadership group has been the semis, up 40%. And the semis are almost entirely related to China. So you lose that leadership group, what are you going to do, default to healthcare? which has been abysmal. The domestics have been abysmal during this period. So I think it's really important. I think there has to be a deal. I hate to be dire about it, but David, if he walks away, if the president walks away right now, you would see.
I'll tell you, Jim, there are plenty of people who are going to say he should walk away, that it was not worth this fight if you're really going to end up with a largely an agreement that says, okay, we'll lower tariffs and buy more of your stuff. That's not enough.
No, it's supposed to be rollback of the 2025, I call it the world domination, but it's the made in China play. And the made in China means, listen, we can cut out the U.S. Now, there's another old camp, David, that says they have to do intellectual property because they themselves have a lot of intellectual property they don't want stolen. But remember, in the West, they haven't really been a serial stealer of intellectual property. Look, it's a little more precarious, and that's why I think that you don't have stocks up huge. I mean, when I watched the futures start last night, they started trading about 3 hours after the Journal story about how there's going to be a deal. And I thought the futures would open up huge, and they didn't. And I think they didn't because people just don't believe, or they think that the president is too mercurial to bank on. That is something I agree with. I think his mercurial nature. He's at the meeting this weekend for conservatives,
right?
And he started talking about how the Fed favors a strong dollar, which isn't necessarily true. But we know his chief economic advisor has been on record for multiple years here at CNBC as favoring King Dollar. So I kind of struggle over the idea where you got the chief economic advisor favoring King Dollar, and here's the president trashing Jay Powell because he favors a strong dollar. And it begins to feel a little sitcom-like.
Yeah, well,
a little sitcom-like.